Last year, Thermaltake unveiled its new suppressor case series with a pair of mid-towers known as the F51 and the F31, and both received glowing reviews from professional tech reviewers and consumers. The highlights included the great looks, excellent thermal performance, wide range of configuration possibilities, and of course the quiet operating volume thanks to the use of effective sound deadening material. Thermaltake has now expanded the suppressor series to support additional form factors by introducing the Suppressor F1, a boxy little case designed to accommodate mini ITX builds. Measuring just 276mm tall, 260mm wide, and 319mm deep, the F1 boasts a 22.8 litre capacity and weighs just 3.2 kilos, despite its mostly steel construction. Externally, the F1 shares many of the design attributes of its larger siblings. That solid brushed front panel is on display, while all the I/O gear can be found at the left side of the facade. Thermaltake says the I/O panel has been designed with a convenience and a clean look in mind. The panel features dual USB 3 ports and HD audio connectors together with the power and reset buttons. The convenience of the I/O panel's placement will really depend on where you sit the case. For ultimate convenience, you want to sit the F1 on your desk and ideally on your right hand side. Along with the front panel, the interchangeable side panels are also well ventilated. These symmetrical panels allow users to build the system with personality. You can play around with the panels and configure for either the best viewing presentation or cooling performance. Two magnetic side filters found on the ventilated panels can be easily removed for cleaning. Also, a removable PSU dust filter and adjustable shockproof rubbers can be found on the removable bottom panel. Around the back, we find an interesting layout. The ATX power supply bracket is located centrally in the bottom of the case in a horizontal orientation. Directly above it is the motherboard's I/O panel, followed by the two 80mm fan grills. There are also two expansion slots to the right which allow the F1 to support dual slot graphics cards. Inside, the Suppressor F1 has been divided into two main chambers. The upper chamber, which houses all the core system components, focuses on cooling performance, while the lower chamber is designed for the PSU, cable management and storage devices. Speaking of storage, the F1 can accommodate a pair of 3.5-inch drives and two 2.5-inch drives, all of which are hidden in the lower chamber. The drives are mounted on a pair of custom drive racks which slot into the F1 once the drives are attached. Even with a large ATX power supply installed, there's plenty of room to tuck away excess cabling in the lower chamber, which helps create a neat looking build. I should also note that the F1 will accept power supplies as long as 200mm. Up top, there's enough room for a 140mm tall CPU cooler, while a dual slot graphics card as long as 255mm will fit. It's possible to go as long as 285mm for the graphics card, but the backside of the card will end up being the front panel. Now that we've seen in and around the Suppressor F1, it's time to stock it with some hardware and conduct some thermal testing. At the moment, one of my older home theatre PCs is built in the sleek little Silverstone RVZ01, and for this review, I thought it might be interesting to move the hardware from that build into the F1. Of course, before doing so, I'll grab some temperatures for the CPU and GPU installed in the RVZ01 and then compare them to the F1. The hardware in question is an Intel Core i5-4670K running on an ASRock Z87E ITX. It's an old motherboard now, I know, but it still works so well. Plugged in are 16GB of DDR3 memory and a GB Radeon R9290X. The biggest cooler I could fit inside the Raven RVZ01 was the Silverstone Nitrogen Series NT06 Pro. Thermaltake's F1 will support much taller coolers and low-profile models like the NT06 Pro aren't required. However, in an effort to keep the thermal results comparable, we're stuck with the Nitrogen Series cooler. Coming from the RVZ01, it has to be said that the installation process for the Suppressor F1 is considerably more user-friendly. Where half the system needs to be disassembled in order to change a hard drive or the power supply in the Raven, this isn't the case at all with the F1. All the panels are removable and this makes installation extremely quick and easy. Sliding off the bottom panel to install the power supply made life easy and helped to create a neat and tidy build. Speaking of which, there aren't really any innovative cable management features offered by the F1, rather the design lends itself to good cable management. The only part of the design I didn't love were the drive cages. They were a little too crude in my opinion, as I found removing them and reattaching them very cumbersome. The drive brackets don't clip into place very well and I found myself having to squeeze/force them back in. Other than that, for such a tiny computer case, the installation process was surprisingly straightforward, and I appreciate the fact that you can install or remove virtually all the components without first having to remove something else. Performance-wise, the Thermaltake Suppressor F1 is extremely quiet, and although I don't have any scientific data to show you, it is quieter than the Raven RVZ01. Unfortunately, the temperatures weren't quite as good as the RVZ01, as the system on a whole ran a few degrees warmer. Nothing alarming, but certainly not an improvement either. Had the front-mounted 200mm fan been able to spin a little faster than 800 RPM, we feel the temperatures could have been greatly improved. Some users have suggested that the Suppressor F1 is very similar to Corsair's Obsidian 250D. And while there are a number of similarities, the cases are still quite different. Perhaps the biggest difference, however, is the price. While the 250D is currently selling for $80, the F1 costs us $50 or 70 AUD, so it quickly becomes apparent that the F1 is very competitively priced. Throughout the review, I had to keep reminding myself that this is just a $50 case, and this helps to excuse a few of the areas where the build quality was a bit suspect. The magnetic dust filters on each of the side panels, for example, kept falling apart when removed, and I had to reattach the magnetic strips all the time. The Perspex window is pretty poor as well. Mine had some brown flakes that looked a lot like cardboard ingrained in it, which was odd. The Perspex also scratched and scuffed very easily, which was a shame. Still, keeping that $50 price tag in mind, the Suppressor F1 has a lot to offer budget mini ITX builders. For a case that can handle large tower style CPU coolers, full-length graphics cards, and large ATX power supplies, the F1 is shockingly small. As mentioned, it's very easy to work with, and once complete, it's easy to go back and change components. The thermal performance is respectable too, particularly given how quiet the case is. The slightly larger size of the Suppressor F1 gives it an advantage over most mini ITX cases in this price range when it comes to hardware support and ease of installation. While I really like the Silverstone Sugo SG13, Cooler Master Elite 120 Advanced, and Fractal Design Node 304 for example, the more compact design of these cases makes them hard to live with if you update hardware on a regular basis. Part of the reason why I hadn't upgraded my RVZ01 system in so long was down to the fact that it's a real job to change anything in that case. Thanks for joining me for another Hardware Unboxed product review. I'm your host Matt, and I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments or on our forum at hardwareunboxed.com. See you next time.